Russia claiming it plans to drastically reduce its assault on Kyiv and Chernihiv following another round of talks with Ukraine today. In spite of that, we are seeing unthinkable destruction in places like Irpin and Kyiv suburbs. Now, the U.S. is warning that Russia could be repositioning troops in other parts of Ukraine. That could include eastern Ukraine, where cities like Mariupol have been under intense Russian attacks. I want to bring in now former defense advisor to Ukraine, Colonel Liam Collins, as well as Major John Spencer, author of Connected Soldiers, Life, Leadership, and Social Connections in Modern War. I'm happy to have both of you gentlemen on. Thank you so much for joining us. Colonel Collins, we've talked about how skeptical the U.S. and the West are about this Russian announcement, but let's look at what it actually means in Russian if Russian forces do scale back near Kyiv. You know the Ukrainian forces well. What would this mean for their ability to defend their country?
Yeah, I mean, at first I'd say, right, I mean, it's a sign the war clearly is not going well for Putin if he's going to remove the forces from that, a key objective, what is probably his key objective of the war. So that's the first thing. It's clearly a sign for that. And I think Ukraine will clearly react to it, right, as Russia consolidates its forces somewhere else. Ukraine will respond in kind. I mean, those of us that worked with them significantly are not surprised by the Ukrainian performance. They embarked on a path of, comprehensive review of their defense establishment in 2016 that culminated with the enactment by then President Poroshenko of the Strategic Defense Bulletin of Ukraine. And that was a commitment to reform the defense establishment because that was the thing they were worried about, was a large-scale Russian invasion. And so they have that, right? They have a culture of volunteerism, right, going back to 2014 that rushed to the front to defend against the Russian invasion or the Russian support to the separatists at that time. That hasn't changed, only become a little bit more formalized and institutionalized with the Territorial Defense Brigade, so they can be able to react to that. And then also, right, a culture of a cultural change within the Ukrainian military that empowers junior leaders to make decisions on the battlefield, right? The speed of battle is too fast in the 21st century. And so empowering those leaders after 8 years of fighting in the Donbass, they realized, hey, we need junior leaders to make these kind of decisions on their own, give them the broad guidance and mission orders, and go out and execute. So as Russia shifts to other places, or assuming they do move troops and reposition them, Ukraine's demonstrated that they're going to be able to perform.
Major Spencer, you've been on with me before. You predicted that Russian forces would have a hard time with urban battles. That's been especially true in Kyiv. Is there any way to look at this other than Russia failing at one of their primary goals?
Absolutely not, Don. I've said since day one that Kyiv, the taking of Kyiv, was their stated strategic objective from day one. They didn't even call Ukraine a country. He wanted Kyiv. Like we talked about in the beginning, every day they didn't lose, they're winning. Today, that's a clear sign that they are winning and not just a little bit. You can call this repositioning, which that doesn't happen overnight. You can't just move forces from like Kyiv to the eastern part of Ukraine. These are demoralized, taking apart units that high casualty rates, they're freezing, it's wet. The moral, you and I have talked about how important that is. Ukrainians are winning big time.
You say that the Russians can't just pull their forces out of the Kyiv area and reposition them to the east. Why not? And where do you think they would go?
Well, one, terrain matters, Don. So where are they going to go? They're going to go up through Belarus all the way around. I mean, they can't go through what we call enemy territory without continuing to be ambushed and counterattacked. I mean, look what's happening in places like Sumy and Marikov, these places where the Ukrainians are moving out of the defense very protected and very well and attacking anything moving. An ambush is one of the most powerful attacks in history because you use surprise on a moving or temporarily halted element. What do the Russians want to do? They want to move from their temporary defensive positions now, which you and I have talked about how powerful the defense is. But they're already broken apart. You and I know this. I mean, with all the reports of their morale, the time and distance and the health of these forces matter. You can't just pull those guys out and throw them into the east, into the Donbass regions, where 1/3 of the Ukrainian army is positioned, and that's a hard fighting unit. So in all aspects, you can't just move them. One, you can't fly them. So you got to drive them. Vehicles break down. We know they're terrible at maintenance. I mean, this may brief well for them politically to say about the Donbass, but Ukrainians should rejoice in this phase. It's still a dangerous point, right? So there's still many people suffering, but they should rejoice and use this to inspire even more of them to continue fighting. And what that does to the, you and I have talked about this, the will of those fighters, it's huge.
John Spencer, Colonel Collins, thank you both very much. We'll have you back. We appreciate it. It is known
Thanks,
as the
John.
breadbasket of Europe. Now Russia's invasion is completely upending Ukraine's food production and threatening famine for millions around the globe.